In 2017, Sega released Sonic Mania, a celebration of classic Sonic the Hedgehog featuring remixed iconic zones, a handful of new ones, and a return to the tried and true Sonic the Hedgehog formula. There was much celebration. In 2023, Sega released Sonic Superstars, a brand new classic Sonic game that introduced a host of new concepts. While it's had many detractors, it also has many fans, including me for one. The reception to both games means Mania is definitely the better game though, right? Well, not necessarily. This is actually the third part of this mini-series where I deep dive into the two games, with reviews of each game breaking down their individual strengths and weaknesses. So now the time has come to put them head to head. Which one will come out on top? That is what I'm here to answer. This is Dan the Mega Driver of the Sega Guys with Sonic Superstars vs Sonic Mania. Why pit these games head to head, and why have this conversation yet again? Well, a few months back, images surfaced of Sonic Mania 2 concept art, featuring Sonic in an outback setting. This naturally sent the Sonic fandom into overdrive, with some lamenting that we got Sonic Superstars from Arzest rather than Mania 2 from Christian Whitehead & Co. This line of thinking ignores the fact that Whitehead and Sega parted on amicable terms, that the perceived Mania 2 would have been drastically different from the original, and that the proposed sequel never got further than those mock-ups as Whitehead and his team moved on to Penny's Big Breakaway. The extent of the animosity towards Superstars is something that I find baffling. I loved my time with Superstars, and back in October 2023, I felt that it was actually better than Mania, though that enthusiasm has cooled in the intervening years. So how do I pit these two games against each other? Well, I have 10 categories where I compare these games, each worth 10 points each, for a final score out of 100. In order to ensure that this is 100% fair, these games have been replayed under the same conditions. The ports that you see here are the PC versions, albeit Superstars is run on Steam while Mania is run on Epic. And of course, both games were played with the same controller, and to ensure the maximum level of Sega-ness, I played both with a Retro-Bit Mega Drive controller. One final point to note, for Mania I have included the Encore DLC for my comparisons. The reasons are twofold. First, because the physical retail release of Mania includes the DLC as standard, and secondly, the cost of the game plus DLC is lower than the Superstars base price, so I feel that this is a fair way to compare them. With all that said, and without further ado, let's get into the clash of the classic Sonics. Every gamer, to some degree, is a graphics fiend. We love good looking games, even retro ones, and Sonic the Hedgehog back in 1991 was a game at least partially sold on its visuals. And so it's the graphics that first hit players, and that's what we'll focus on first. Sonic Mania has a deceptively retro look. I say deceptively because I feel like the nuance of its visuals are too easily overlooked. While it borrows designs from the 16-bit games, just about every tile, enemy and background is more detailed and expressive, with an abundance of animation to bring the former 16-bit worlds to life. It is the classic Sonic the Hedgehog pixel art style perfected. Superstars, on the other hand, modernises the 2D world with environments and objects comprised entirely of polygons using modern rendering techniques. As first impressions go, the first zone exudes that classic Sega aesthetic, with the first zone being a beautiful mix of green fields, Sega blues and checkered rolling hills. However, beyond that first stage, the visual design is a bit hit and miss. There's Highlights, Pinball Carnival is the closest we get to that surrealist Sonic look of old, while the inventiveness of Cyber Station in its neon 3D pixel retro glory is without a doubt one of the highlights of the package. Beyond that though, the stages can look empty and bland. What's more, characters and enemies lack that extra flourish, that expressiveness that would bring them to life just that little bit more. Something like Mario Wonder does, where characters feel like the Pixar animation versions of themselves. As things are, Superstars is simply adequate with a few highlights. Mania, with its enhanced classic look, gets the easy win here. The style and the aesthetic win over, even the expressiveness of the characters seems to be heightened over Superstars, and Mania's abstract design makes stages seem busier and more vibrant. Just look at the sand-based zones side by side and it really is no contest. So I'm awarding 6 points to Superstars and a massive 9 to Mania. Another easy win for Sonic Mania should be in the audio, right? Well, let's take a look. Sonic Mania features a soundtrack penned almost exclusively by T. Lopes, with a couple of tracks from Hyper Potions and some support from Naofumi Hataya. The music is a mix of old and new, though the old tracks feature slightly different instrumentation to the originals. Sonic Superstars meanwhile also features music from T. Lopes, as well as several Sega Sound Team alumni. Aside from various Sonic jingles, it is 100% original and new arrangements, but does that make it better? If we look on the Mania side, it also has new tunes, and to be honest, they're better than the arrangements of the old ones. Ruby Delusions, Blossom Haze and Rogues Gallery are all-time great Sonic tunes. Meanwhile, Superstars really is no slouch itself, with tracks like Speed Jungle Act 1, Cyber Station Zone and Pinball Carnival Act 2 being highlights. It even has Takanobu Misayoshi behind Golden Capital Act 2, giving us a tune with real Dragon Ball intro vibes. The problem with Superstars is that some of the tunes are kind of uninspired, such as the boss themes. They're not as bad as many say, they suit the action very well, but the instrumentation leaves something to be desired. Mania's biggest fault in my eyes is that some of the classic themes feature different instrumentation, as I said earlier, and I don't like them quite as much as the originals as a result. Flying Battery and Hydrosity are examples where the music is enhanced, but I don't feel like it's necessarily better. However, music is extremely subjective and the instrumentation on those tracks especially so, and given that they're still great renditions, it's barely a criticism. So here I'm giving the underrated Sonic Superstars soundtrack a 7, but for a superb soundtrack with absolutely no skips, Mania gets a 9. So, does story matter in a Sonic the Hedgehog game? Well, since both games feature an animated opening sequence and both model themselves off the lore-heavy Sonic and Knuckles, cutscenes and all, we'll have to say yes. Starting with Sonic Mania then, Dr. Robotnik finds another miracle gem on the floating island, the Phantom Ruby. This jewel has reality warping powers, immediately transforming the Egg Robos into the hard-boiled heavies. Sonic and the gang battle the Doc and his new lieutenants across various zones, culminating in a three-way battle in a void created by the Phantom Ruby as the Heavy King betrays the Doc. The ending apparently sees Sonic transported into Sonic Forces, given the appearance of classic Sonic and the Phantom Ruby in that game. Nonetheless, in Encore mode, Sonic returns to save Ray and Mighty, only to find that they were actually the Heavy Magician in disguise, who then steals the Phantom Ruby, resetting and remixing the entire story. In Sonic Superstars, Dr. Robotnik discovers North Star Islands, home of unusual energies and gigantic animals, and he enlists Fang the Sniper to help him discover the island sequence. Once there, they recruit the Guardian of the Archipelago, Trip the Sungazer, to assist them and fend off Sonic and Co, who have given chase. During the adventure, Trip is mistreated by Fang and she defects to Sonic's side, and once Dr. Robotnik is defeated, she embarks on her own adventure to rid the islands of Robotnik and his machines, facing down Knack, or Fang, whatever you want to call him, at the very end. Somewhere along the way, collecting the Chaos Emeralds causes Trip to transform into a dragon, while another ancient dragon is released, which Super Sonic must defeat so that Trip can seal him away in the final battle. Both stories are somewhat lacking overall. The Phantom Ruby does its job as a reality-distorting MacGuffin in Mania, but overall the whole Sonic Mania story suffers from its Sonic Forces connection, which uses the Phantom Ruby in a radically different way. Superstars meanwhile feels a lot more traditionally Sonic-like. The references to the islands and a mysterious guardian who is tricked are all callbacks to the original games. But the "oh, here's a dragon" last story feels really tacked on. Overall, I'll give the nod to Superstars here, but there's no resounding victory either way in this battle of mid. When it comes to characters, by default, Superstars features 5 playable characters compared to Sonic Mania's 3, and it's here that the Encore mode in Sonic Mania comes in to level the playing field. The core trio of Sonic, Tails and Knuckles is present in each game, with abilities that are aligned across both titles. Dr. Robotnik also serves as the primary antagonist for much of the core campaigns in each title. Let's look beyond that then. Amy rounds out the core Sonic Superstars cast with a double jump ability and her Pico Hammer, giving her spin attack some extra range. When you beat the main story, Trip the Sungazer becomes available to play, and she comes with a double jump and wall and ceiling climbing abilities. Meanwhile, Encore for Sonic Mania reintroduces Ray and Mighty from the Sega Sonic the Hedgehog arcade game. Mighty is a little bit unexciting with his ground pound attack, though Ray with his glide ability is pretty fun to play as. Mighty is also invulnerable to spikes when rolling, so there's that as well. On the other side, Superstars has Fang the Sniper, or Knack the Weasel as he was once known. Like Mighty and Ray, it's cool to have an old character return, and he serves as the secondary antagonist, being particularly prominent in Trip's story. As a final boss, Sonic Superstars introduces the Dark Dragon, which I've got to admit is pretty lame. The arrival comes without much backstory, and he fulfills the role of generic final bad guy. Mania meanwhile has the hard-boiled heavies, souped up egg robos, and to be honest, despite each one having a defining characteristic, they're just not that much more interesting than the egg robo in Sonic & Knuckles, or even the one in Trip's story in Superstars. While we get into the gameplay and zone design later, I do think it is a factor here. Mania features alternative routes for characters, Superstars offers bespoke levels in addition to that, plus an entire character-specific story. Overall, I do prefer the Sonic Superstars cast. As much as I do have a soft spot for Ray, the introduction of Trip who has an actual character arc, the presence of Amy, and the mean-spiritedness of Knack outweigh Mighty and the heavies. So for me, it's 8 to Mania and 9 to Superstars. Gameplay is the most critical aspect of any video game, the centre point to which all games should be judged. Here it would be the great differentiator between the two titles, and we would dig deep into both games, but to be honest, there really isn't much to say. You see, both games play superbly. There may be minor differences in the physics between the two, but there's none that I could find. So let's look at what is different. Sonic, Tails and Knuckles are almost exactly the same between both games, as I said earlier. I also prefer Amy's gameplay compared to Mighty's, but I find that Ray and Trip are hard to choose between. Mania introduced the drop dash, though that is also present in Sonic Superstars as well, even if honestly I'd never really use it in either game. Sonic Mania does retain the elemental shields, for better and for worse. Better because they're cool, worst because it's just rehashing Sonic the Hedgehog 3 again. Is it unfair of me to criticise Sonic Mania for recycling ideas when that's its thing? I don't think so. Because Sonic Superstars diverges, elemental shields do return in some capacity, but they're utilised very differently. Superstars also has the Emerald powers. However, the implementation of those Emerald powers is not the best. Is it unfair of me to criticise Sonic Superstars for trying something new? I don't think so. In the end, both play really well. If you ignore the fact that Sonic Mania doesn't do anything new, and that Sonic Superstars does things that are new but doesn't quite stick the landing, I think they come out about equal. So, 8 apiece here. Both games have multiplayer components. Sonic Mania supports up to 4 players in split screen with the Encore DLC. Sonic Superstars supports up to 8 players via online. Does that give Sonic Superstars the win? If only it were so simple. Sonic Mania's competition mode is basically the same as Sonic the Hedgehog 2. You race through split screen versions of some of the game's zones, and when you get to the end, you are judged on 5 categories. The player that wins the most categories wins the round. You can set the number of rounds, the item types, and there are 12 acts to play through. Sonic Superstars Battle Mode is very different. Here you play a number of challenges using a robotic avatar. Gameplay and physics differ to the main game somewhat, but there is more variety and you can play online. If there's ever anyone around, that is. It also features an offline mode if you're short of friends, like me. Both games feature co-op, though neither game suits the design well. Sonic Mania works much the same as Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and 3 did, with Tails frequently getting lost off screen. Sonic Superstars increases the co-op antics from 2 to 4 players, but with largely the same rules, albeit 2 other significant changes. Firstly, players can choose when they want to respawn in the game, and secondly, the player that is the furthest ahead in the zone is the main player, not necessarily player 1 or Sonic. There is of course time attack mode, which is the real draw for hardcore Sonic competition. So, who wins? It really is a tough call, but Sonic Mania's tried and tested gameplay would win me over if it wasn't lacking something extra. The competition mode lacks the special stage battle of Sonic 2, which in my opinion makes this the lesser competition mode. Sonic Superstars meanwhile is occasionally clunky, but features more diversity, more content, and lets up to 8 players play online at once. Plus, despite the implementation being mostly broken, you can still play the story with 3 friends. Neither package really shines, but I'm going to award 5 points to Sonic Mania and 6 points to Sonic Superstars. The zones is where things get really interesting. With gameplay that is effectively a tie, it is the level designs where the games will really fight it out. Sonic Mania has 12 zones, plus the Egg Reverie finale, plus Angel Island Act 1 in Encore mode, which sort of counts. Sonic Superstars has 11 zones, plus the last story battle. Both sets of zones are, quite frankly, superb. This is top tier Sonic stage design in both instances, as I said in the game's individual reviews. However, if you did watch my Sonic Mania review, you know what's coming. A significant portion of Sonic Mania is a retread of what came before. Sure, every zone has at least one act which is new in terms of layout, but you'll spend a significant portion of game time experiencing a sense of deja vu. But that's the point, isn't it? Mania is a celebration of the past. See, I would agree with you. In 2017, these days you can play the original Mega Drive and CD Sonic games a number of ways, and you should. I certainly replay them all the time, over and over again. When I replay Mania now, it just doesn't feel as fresh, and I don't feel the excitement that I do for playing these stages in their original forms. This is where Sonic Superstars excels. The zone biomes may be mostly familiar, but there's enough twist to keep them engaging and new. Plus, they all have gimmicks that work really well with the gameplay flow. Sonic Mania does have new zones, with Studiopolis being the highlight, but the rest aren't quite as engaging or memorable, aside from perhaps Press Garden Act 2. In fact, I might actually say that I don't like Press Garden Act 1 or both acts of Titanic Monarch, because to me, they look and feel saturated, awkward and dull compared to the rest of the package. So Superstars gets the win for me here, and I feel confident giving it a score of 9 to Sonic Mania 7, with all new zones and designs, all playing as well as Sonic's best, with the one exception being Frozen Base Act 2, because you know, I love Fantasy Zone, and I love the reference in this game, but maybe it shouldn't have been an entire act. Though I guess this was to offer something similar to Sonic Mania's P.O.P.O. boss? Speaking of which, Sonic Superstars is infamous for its boss fights. Some feel as if they're so bad that they ruin the game. I know that feeling, I felt it every time I battled Knack during the end of Trip's story. But do you know who else made me feel like that? This guy. And this guy. And these guys. So let's not pretend that Sonic Mania's bosses were incredible. They too had an abundance of flaws. Both games for some reason love to throw in a few auto-scroll bosses, despite only Sonic & Knuckles featuring them in the classic games and Sonic Advance 2 killing the concept for many of us. Personally, when it comes to auto-scroll bosses, I hate them all. Even the opening Green Hill boss feels like a chore at times, while the Pterodactyl in Sonic Superstars is the thing of nightmares. I fully understand the challenge of creating a Sonic boss. They have to be tough, but also interesting. Unfortunately, this leads to lame gimmicks in both games, and a lot of waiting around. Bosses in Superstars have attack patterns that you must wait to play out, which makes them dull and tedious. But Mania is sometimes just as guilty. The boss in Studiopolis Act 2 literally has you waiting for the weather to change. Many of the bosses in Sonic Superstars are tedious and frustrating, while that can also apply to some of Sonic Mania's, such as the case in the Flying Battery boss. Or Sonic Mania's can be messy and easy, just like Titanic Monarch's final boss. And of course it reuses boss designs, which once again prove to be the highlights of that game, except in some instances they're actually worse. Sonic Superstars' final boss is long, drawn out and frustrating, but at least has a degree of spectacle as Super Sonic flies around battling a dragon while his friends drop off rings. Sonic Mania's Agriri boss is simply a mess and can be infuriating unless you just stand on the floor and cheese the bosses out, effectively eliminating the point of playing as Super Sonic. Neither game really succeeds here. Compared to the series classics such as those in Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 and Knuckles, both Mania and Superstars are found wanting. Since you can register multiple hits on bosses, meaning they're not as time consuming in Sonic Mania, I will give the nod to that game here, but its nostalgia driven and often messy boss fights mean it's far from a comprehensive victory. 6-5 in favour of Sonic Mania. The special stages for both games are all new. Even Sonic Mania's, which, while clearly influenced by earlier games, is significantly different in execution. Entering the special stages is identical in both games. You find the giant rings hidden around the stages, you jump in, and away you go. In terms of how these 3D special stages operate, Sonic Mania features Sonic chasing a Chaos Emerald held by a UFO around a circuit, while Sonic Superstars has him swing around a 3D trapeze also chasing a Chaos Emerald. Which is better? Well, Sonic Mania is the more exciting, especially as Sonic reaches top speed around the stage, but it becomes slippery and frustrating later on. Meanwhile, Sonic Superstars is very abstract and, despite being quite original, it isn't really that Sonic-like. Both sets of special stages are enjoyable, though the extra 7 stages in Sonic Mania's Encore mode can really frustrate at times. Superstars can feel frustrating itself, but once you understand the Emerald's movements, they become quite easy, to the point that I was happy to replay them for the emblems. Both games also feature bonus stages, and both here are quite derivative. Sonic Superstars copies Sonic 1's special stage theme, albeit it operates slightly differently with multiple stages in each entry, while Mania literally takes the special stages and their layouts straight out of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. The approaches for both games are imperfect, but Mania's is more exciting and Superstars feels more balanced. Unable to choose a winner, I'm actually giving both of them 7s here. So here we are in the last category. How long will you be playing these games? With 5 characters each and a similar number of zones and bosses, at face value, they seem fairly even. Superstars may sound easier because it dispenses with the life system as many modern platform games do, but it's actually the tougher game. Mania meanwhile lets you hoover up a good number of extra lives anyway, so it becomes a bit of a moot point. With regards to getting through the main content, Sonic Mania and its Encore mode took about 7 hours, compared to 12 hours to see all of Sonic Superstars' story. Both games have different routes for some characters, something more pronounced in Sonic Mania as you have to create a new save slot to change hero, though Superstars encourages play with the rest of the cast at your own pace. Beyond the main story, the multiplayer and the time attack, both games feature unlockables. Sonic Mania tasks you with replaying the blue sphere stages for emblems. Sonic Superstars lets you earn coins numerous other ways, through bonus fruit stages, the Sonic 1 style stages, and simply playing through the game again. Sonic Mania rewards you with game modifiers such as the hilarious and Knuckles mode, debug mode, and so on. Sonic Superstars lets you deck out your robotic avatar in an assortment of gear. There's plenty in both games to keep you coming back. If I were to pick just one, it'll be Superstars. The grind for robot cosmetics and the ability to earn coins in all sorts of ways means that for me it comes out on top, especially with its more varied multiplayer. 9 for Superstars and 8 for Mania. So in conclusion then, if we add up both sets of scores across the board, Sonic Mania has a total of 72, while Sonic Superstars has a total of 72. Okay, when I wrote this script initially I didn't expect this to be a tie. I've just been assigning values as I went along, so I actually thought that Sonic Mania would edge it out. So bear with me, you did not watch 3 videos just to see a draw. So with both games on 72 points apiece, it's going to come down to a judge's decision, and since I'm the judge, I choose Sonic Superstars. Yes, for me, Sonic Superstars isn't so much the better game, it's just the more worthwhile one. I feel that it is criminally misunderstood, unfairly criticised, and in reality is just really, really good. It gets the classic Sonic stage design spot on and tries a bunch of new things that make the experience fresh. Sure, it doesn't get them all right, but they're still enjoyable enough additions in their own right. If I'm replaying the classic Sonic games, Superstars feels like a great addition. Mania, meanwhile, as I said in the game's review, feels like a greatest hits, with bonus tracks that aren't as great as the original material. If I've just beaten the 16-bit games, Mania just feels too much like a retread. However, and this is a big however, I recognise that Mania is perhaps objectively the better game. Better visuals, better music, and despite a big chunk of content not being original, it's still a classic. So, here's the conclusion. If you've never played a Sonic game before or haven't played one in a long time, play Sonic Mania. It's the perfect gateway to classic Sonic the Hedgehog. If you're a Sonic veteran who replays the original games regularly, well, let's face it, you're probably going to make up your own mind, but for me, Sonic Superstars is the better experience. The truth is, both games try different things and are targeting different audiences, and both have their place in Sonic history. After around an hour of video content, 10 categories, 3 videos on 2 games, the answer is the same as it has always been. You should play the game that better suits what you're looking for, and hopefully these videos have helped you make up your mind on what Sonic game you should play next. And really, that classic Sonic is still capable of offering a range of experiences after 35 years is definitely something worth celebrating, right? So here's to many more years of Sonic the Hedgehog and 2 incredible games in Sonic Mania and Sonic Superstars. And until next time, we will see you on the Sega side.